Hello, everybody, and welcome to 38 Weeks to Go, your weekly podcast about fantasy football. Gameweek 27 is done and dusted. We now have 11 weeks to go. With that time remaining, how are you feeling about your position? I am sure the pressure is getting lesser and lesser. This week for me was a bit of a better one than last week in that I got more points, but it was still about the average. I got 64 points, which is one above 63. I was a bit unlucky in that Arsenal just went ham too quickly too early. 5-0 at halftime, and my captain was subbed. Saka was my captain. I decided to go all in on Arsenal. I just chose the wrong guy. I am of the firm belief if they were winning 2-0 at halftime, he would have stayed on until about 60th minute. He was a victim of their own success. So my captain finished with 14 points. It wasn't bad, because that's better than Haaland anyway. However, if it wasn't for Saka, I was going to choose Ollie Watkins, who got 13. And so that wasn't too good. Another mishap in my team was Trippier. Newcastle getting a clean sheet, and then him getting injured and being dragged off in the 52nd minute. So my team underperformed, and it was just unlucky. On the bench, I had Malo Gusto, who had 5. And while I regret not having him on the pitch, if I was to redo the weekend, I would have probably left him again. I would have only probably put him as my first sub. The biggest score of the game week comes from Arsenal again. They are better than having a team playing twice. Let me just read to you their last Premier League results. Sheffield, 6-0. Newcastle, 4-1. Burnley, 5-0. West Ham, 6-0. And then Liverpool, 3-1. That means they have 24 goals in their last 5 games. If they had scored 6 by halftime, that would have been the Premier League record for most goals scored in one half. This Sheffield game was done by the 16th minute. It was 3-0 already. By the 24th minute, when Havertz scored the 4th, the fans were just exiting the stadium. I'm not sure if Sheffield are a proper representative of a team that has been promoted. However, this was a perfect example to show you the gap between the Championship and the Premier League. And those coming up next season really just have to do better than this. Sheffield and Burnley have not been competitive this season. Odegaard scored first, then there was an own goal, then Martinelli, Kai Havertz, Declan Rice, and Ben White finished off the scoring. Saka had 2 assists before being substituted painfully for me at halftime. Havertz had an assist, Kiwior and Martinelli had assists as well. Havertz had 3 bonus points, Odegaard had 2, Kiwior and White had 1 each. I spoke briefly about this in the last episode where I said Havertz is sneaky good, and if there's some of you who are having him in your team, congratulations. That is a differential. Of course, at this time, it seems like just having an Arsenal player is just easy money. Therefore, we should all be trying to make that money. Kiwior and Ben White tend to have assists in the defense. I have been going for Gabriel to maintain my clean sheets, and it has worked out, and then when he scores, it's even better. But Kiwior, for those of you who were looking for a wing-back who scores / assists, he is sneaky good, especially considering his price. It's just a matter of balancing Zinchenko's availability. Arsenal even look more formidable than they were last season. It's quite impressive. Yet they are number 3. But I guess if you're an Arsenal fan, you'd prefer to be in this position. Just looking back, waiting to see if Man City will catch up is painful. It makes you forget what you're trying to do. Maybe this way is a better approach. The marquee game of the weekend was the Manchester derby. Manchester City 3, Man United 1. When you look at the post-match reviews, you see that Ten Hag thought that Manchester United played really well. And it makes you wonder, is this how far Man U have fallen? Or is it just an honest evaluation of what you would be expecting to get against this Man City team? It must be so weird being a Man United fan, a legacy one especially. You have such high expectations, And then you hear your manager speaking in almost a defeatist way. I'm sorry, because that must be so weird for you all. Rashford scored a super goal. His first goal in who knows how long. Considering his run of form, it was surprising that he still had that in him. Maybe it's because he saw the England manager and he wants to be in the Euro squad. Who knows what was going through his mind. He had a bit of a half chance not too long after, and if he had scored that, it might have been a different game. And maybe that's what Ten Hag saw, the possibility of a different outcome. However, that was not what happened. Phil Foden. Man, I need to bring that boy into my team. He is looking like he's going to be KDB's successor effortlessly. Maybe not effortlessly, but the successor is there. Now you just need another Phil Foden replacement. He scored 2 good goals. The first one was a beauty. The second one was also good. And then Man United made some changes and Amrabat gave away the ball for Haaland's goal. Haaland had already missed what looked like a sitter. At that point, I was like, this is why I didn't put him as my captain. Haaland seems broken. It's weird to say that for the top goal scorer, but he just doesn't seem the same. I don't know if he's lacking a bit of confidence. I don't know what it is. Maybe he's too relaxed. I don't know what it is. I can't even speculate. But he is not the same guy that he was. Maybe it's Doku. I've been harping on about Doku the whole season. But when you notice how much better they played when Alvarez came on, it makes you wonder why Doku starts at all. When Alvarez came on, the game just changed. The approach to football changed. Maybe the answer is just putting Doku on the bench, or at least just hanging on until Grealish comes back. Amrabat must have had Haaland as his captain because he was asleep. He does not look like the guy we thought he was going to be. It seems like a case of a tournament really propping up a guy's value. And Amrabat, I think the Morocco's run in the World Cup really pushed his value up because Fiorentina have scammed Man U. Haaland got in and got the third goal and ended the tie effectively. Although, if you look at the stats, that game was over a long time ago. Haaland and Foden seem to be the best players to get from Man City. And Foden first, then Haaland, then KDB. Although at 10.8, KDB can't be giving you these returns of 2. I know we were all buoyed by the midweek game where Haaland had 5 and KDB had 4 assists. I know we were all moved by that performance, and that I'm sure influenced many people's choice to keep Haaland on as captain even, and maybe even not to remove KDB. But it also seems like Man U watched that game and were like, no, we're not doing anything fancy. We're just going to park the bus and just try to hit them on the counter or something like that. So Foden scored 2, Haaland had 1. Rodri had 2 assists, and Alvarez had 1 assist. Foden had 3 bonus points, Rodrigo had 2 bonus points, and Bernardo had 1. Rashford scored off a rare Fernandes assist. So I'm sure our guy at the bottom is very happy because he has him as his captain instead of Haaland. Liverpool won 1-0, and that was a bit surprising because, well, they're really depleted. And more than that, it was a really suspicious goal. Not really suspicious, but controversial. People were not happy with the goal, especially if you're a Forest fan. 99th minute, McAllister to Darwin Núñez. That game had controversy. The biggest surprise of the weekend comes from Fulham 3, Brighton 0. If you watched this game, you will know that Brighton were a bit unlucky. Ferguson had 2 goals that he should have scored. And then Bonanotte hit the post. If you saw De Zerbi, I can't even imagine how that meeting after the match was. He must have let loose. He was so pissed. But moving on to Fulham. Fulham kept a clean sheet. That was amazing for them. Muniz had a great impact on this game. I don't know where he came from, but he is amazing. He should be somebody we're all looking at. And then Harry Wilson, former Liverpool boy, and I think he's going to be a future Newcastle boy. But Harry Wilson, when he scores, his goals are always so good. He had a great goal to open the game. Then he set up one for Muniz. And then the super sub, Adama Traore, came on. And that was it, game over. He had the last goal of the game. I was personally unhappy because I had a Dingra and I thought he was going to give me returns, but I think since I brought him into my team, he's averaged 1 point a game. It's quite embarrassing. Sometimes, you try to be smart in fantasy and then the fantasy gods just tell you you're not so smart. So, like I said, Muniz, Wilson and Adama scored. The Cordova-Reed, Muniz and Wilson had the assists. Wilson had 3 bonus points, Muniz had 2 and Lino had 1. The top performer this week was Phil Foden with 15 points. The second was Kai Havertz, tied with Wilson for 14 points. White and Watkins were tied for 4th and 5th with 13 points, along with Areola. The top performing goalkeeper was Areola. He saved a penalty from Beto, so he got 13. Kelleher, 3.7 guys, he's 3.7, is number 2 with 9 points. 8 is Neto. That's what he got, along with Leno. And 5th was Dubravka. Something to watch out for is that Arsenal's goalkeeper got injured, Mr. Raya. So he may not play the next game. The best performing defender was White, Ben White, followed by Fabian Schär from Newcastle. Kiwior was the third with 10 points, tied with Roslov from Brentford. And Romero comes back to his performing days. And then Disasi, Konate, Bradley had 8, along with Byrne and Zuma. There were 5 clean sheets this weekend, and that's why there's so many defenders who performed well. When it comes to the midfield, Foden was a top performer, followed by Havertz and Wilson, who were tied at 14. Foden had 15. Cook from Bournemouth had 12. Martinelli had 11. Odegaard and Rodrigo had 10. Alvarez had 9. Rice, Eze, Gordon, Brennan Johnson had 8. When it comes to attackers, Ollie Watkins had 13. Muniz had 11. Timo Werner had 9. Morris from Luton had 8. Isak also had 8. Semenyo had 7. Wissa had 6, along with Nicholas Jackson. Haaland, yeah, that's it. Now, it must be said, Haaland is 14.5. 14.5, guys. 14.5. Please, do not stress to bring him into your team. If you don't already have him, that's not a big deal. Just get Ollie Watkins. Just make sure you have Ollie Watkins. He's performing as well, and he's going to push Haaland until the end of the season for that golden boot. 14.5 is obscene. I mean, I have him, but also I have not removed him, not even when he was injured. So, but if I lost him now, I would not bring him back. 14.5, that's a joke. Let me share with you guys a very interesting stat that I've heard. In 2024, at Bramall Lane is a home of Sheffield, just in case you didn't know. Sheffield have scored the 4th most goals at their own stadium. Do you hear that? They've scored the 4th most goals this season at their own stadium. Isn't that wild? Anyway, moving on. 64 points is what I got, but 63 points were the average. If you got above 63 points, well done. Just like me, you're above average. 15 players from our table got above 63. So, still more than half, but not as good as last week. Speaking of other stats from our table, Haaland has been chosen by 22 players out of 25 in our league. Saka is second with 20. Watkins has been chosen by 19 players out of 25. Palmer by 15. And rounding up the top 5, it's KDB with 11. Now, out of all these people, 14 people captained Haaland this week. 6 people captained Saka. 2 people captained Ollie Watkins, the real winners. And 1 person captained KDB, another one captained Fernandes. The highest points in our group was from no other than Maina Kamau, manager of Dimori FC, 94 points. Well done to you. I know you have been very close before, and I'm happy that you've finally done it. Congrats, Solo. Second was Alexander Mutune, 93 points. Hey, talk about things getting into gear at the right time. Number 1 in the table has 93 points. That is massive. He has now opened a gap of 62 points from number 2. Number 3 was Hans Gruber, formerly known as Mr. 100. He had 87 points. In number 4, we had 82 points from Control-Alt-Delete, manager of Cheese Garnachos. And then after him, in number 5 was number 2, Vexity, who had 78 points. Just like I had alluded a few minutes before, number 1 is really consolidating his position at the top. That 93 points has put him 62 points ahead of number 2. Number 2 is Vexity. He has overtaken, goodness gracious me. He has 1640 points. He had 78 points and those really helped him. Number 3 is Sim Nanijua, who has 1626 points. And number 4 is Why Are You Running? Mr. Leon Motier, who has 1614 points. Nothing is written yet, but number 1 is really stepping away from us. Between number 2 and number 3, it's about 14 points. Between number 3 and number 4, it's 12 points. Between number 4 and number 1, wow, it's over 80 points. Goodness, that's a big gap. Between number 4 and number 5 is about 35 points. And between number 5 and number 6, 2 points. From number 5 to number 8, it's about 30 points. So that's not bad. At the bottom, Melvin Kathrima got 58 points. He has 1170. Jeremiah Berry has 1174. So they're fighting with each other in a matchup of the teams that haven't changed their teams. Number 23, who is probably truly our last active player, got 75 points. So it was a great week for him. But he's about 40 points behind number 22, Mohamed Jibril. So he has 1347 and Jibril has 1398. Ahead of them, rounding up the top 5, or rather the bottom 5, is Kimeo Mutinda, who has 1417 points. Dimori FC, his team had Captain Haaland, who gave him 12. Watkins had 13. Foden had 15. Gordon and Saka had 8 and 7. Then he had Shar and Areola in the defense, and that really carried his team. While looking at Tune's team, also had Haaland as captain, Watkins as well, Foden, Saka, Palmer, and Areola, Burn, Virgil, and Saliba really. He had a really balanced effort. When you look at his team, you're like, yeah, I could have had this team. It was doable. He must be really feeling that pain for having Rodri on the bench. But he would have probably done that again. There's still a few races to be run on the table, and we have 11 weeks left to go. So there is still time to make changes. This might be time to be very calculative and maybe increase your risk-taking appetite. Now, as we move into the next section, when we're looking towards Game Week 28, I must start off by telling you the most important thing to do is to plan for Game Week 29. Whatever decisions you're making now, think about Game Week 29. And this is particularly important if you have already used your free hit. I wouldn't advise you to use a wildcard right now. If you do not have a wildcard, don't use it. I mean, if you have a wildcard, don't use it. But if you have a free hit, this is what the free hit was built for. Game Week 29. If you have used your free hit, you need to plan for Game Week 29 this week, because there's a big void coming up. In Game Week 29, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 games only. Just to put that into perspective, we have 10 games usually in a game week. We have 4. So this means that very many players are missing. Why? Because of the FA Cup, like I'd said in the previous episode, a lot of Premier League teams continued to go to the next round, and that means that it has created a gap here. Now, this also means that there will be a double game week in the future. Maybe not 1, but even 2. And if you have a wild card still, you need to plan for the bigger double game week, whichever one that is. And just to put things into perspective, the teams that will be playing in game week 29 are Burnley, Brentford, Luton, Nottingham Forest, Fulham, Spurs, West Ham, Aston Villa. So, when you're planning game week 28, please think about Brentford players, maybe Luton players, Spurs players, West Ham and Aston Villa players. Try to limit it that way. Or another approach, I guess, could be go all out for game week 28 so that you have all the points and you don't mind doing nothing in game week 29. First game to kick us off will be Manchester United versus Everton. Everton were beaten 3-1 over the weekend. Very painful last-minute goals. I felt bad for them. But West Ham were the better team. Man United were beaten as well. But this one was well deserved. Everton haven't won in 7 matches and they haven't kept a clean sheet in 5 games. So the odds are looking Manchester United. In their last 5 encounters, Man United have beaten Everton in 4 of those 5 games. So it is clear that Manchester United are favourites for this encounter. The real question is, who are you going to count on in this game? Now, for this game week, I'm not going to advise you to get into any players. In fact, the biggest advice I would give you guys is to stay the same or move into players for game week 29. So I'm not going to advise you to move into Manchester United or Everton players. That just doesn't make sense considering the blank game week coming up next. So just stick, if you have Man U assets like I have Garnacho, I will probably keep him. I have a free hit, so I am just going to do whatever I want next week. I mean this week, because I know next week will be fine. Do you believe in Rashford? Do you believe in Fernandes? Do you believe in Garnacho? It's tough. This is the kind of game I could go, well, I want to say either way, but Man U are favourites in this game and they should win. It's just picking out who will be the guy. If you believe in Everton, I still don't know how to recommend a player from this team. Everton are just good for keeping clean sheets and maybe Doucouré scoring and Dwight McNeil, but don't get into this game. After this game week, Everton are blank and then they face Bournemouth, Newcastle, Burnley and Chelsea. So those are not easy fixtures, but maybe after the blank, maybe you could look into them for a defender. After the blank game week, Man U have Liverpool, Brentford, Chelsea, and Liverpool again. So it might not be great to have Man U players right now, but also it depends on if Liverpool's players recover. They seem to be dealing with a lot of injuries successfully. Now, one thing I failed to mention, Bournemouth and Luton have a double game week this week. So it may not be such a bad decision to get in Bournemouth players because of the double game week, especially since one of those games is against Sheffield. The other is against Luton, of course. And if you are looking to get into Bournemouth, Solanke, or as I've seen him being called in forums, Golanke. And then the next part is really tricky because you have to decide whether you believe in the defense. Senesi got injured and so he's off. Now, after that, maybe you get Neto, maybe you get the keeper, or you get Zabarani. But if not, you get maybe Scott, who had a great weekend, or Christie, or Semenyo, or Kluivert, or Tavernier. I do not know what I'm going to do because I am going to get Neto, and I'm going to get a midfielder. I'm not sure which one yet, but I am getting him because a double game must be played. Maybe Tavernier. I feel like he will have something to say in this game. Don't get a Sheffield asset, so I'm not even going to bother that. I'm not going to bother with that. No, don't get a Sheffield asset. Bournemouth have Sheffield, then Luton, and then the blank, and then Everton and Crystal Palace. So this is the right time to get into Bournemouth. Except the void, they will be good for at least 3 or 4 game weeks. They have fixtures that are winnable. Sheffield, after Bournemouth, have a blank game week. Then they have Fulham, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Brentford. The reason I'm reading out their fixtures is so that you can know who to pick to hammer them. You're welcome. Crystal Palace versus Luton. Now, I've just finished telling you that Luton have a double game week. Not only that, they're going to be playing in the void. So, Luton must be on the top of your players to choose from. Now, with Luton, you know they have a game in them. You know they fight. You know they're competitive. You know they always have a goal. Just to put that into perspective, Luton were last held scoreless 16 games ago in November. 1-0 loss to Manchester United. And if you want to go beyond that, the last time they were held without a goal was when they lost to Tottenham early in October. So they will score. The only trick is, if I read out their last goal scorers, it's quite confusing. You have Chong and Morris. Then you have Clark. Then you have Ogbene. Then you have Morris again. And then you have Morris. And then you have Osho, Barkley, Adebayo. Now, the most consistent name in those results is Morris. So I would highly recommend bringing Morris into your team and any of the names you've just heard. If you fancy them keeping a clean sheet, which you should not, you would be wise to bring in Doughty. At least he has attacking returns. So if you have Doughty, don't remove him. Remember, planning for this void involves Luton. So get into Luton, especially since they're playing twice. Having said that, their last encounter with Crystal Palace ended with Luton beating them with goals from Mengi and Brown. Palace have a new manager, Glasner. Palace kind of considered 3 quick goals in 10 minutes. Eze scored a brilliant free kick. Just goes to show that maybe the formula is still the same. If they have their players, they're a threat. If they don't, there's not much they can do, you know. I'm not going to recommend any Crystal Palace players because they're not going to be playing in Gameweek 29. After the Luton game, there's a blank for them. Then Palace will play Forest, Bournemouth, Man City, Liverpool, West Ham. So it'll start softly and then, boom, abrupt halt. As for Luton, they have a double game week. They play Crystal Palace, then they play Bournemouth, then they play Forest, then they play Spurs and Arsenal. So it'll be going up in scale of difficulty. So you can keep your Luton players for the next 2 to 4 weeks. Fulham were the surprise winners of the weekend, if you ask me. Muniz, Wilson beating Brighton in the way they did, that was quite impressive. I would recommend you to get Fulham players since they will be playing in Gameweek 29. Muniz is the first player I'll recommend. And then Wilson. And then Willian. Nope, actually third would be Leno, because those of you who have Leno don't need to be told anything more about Leno. He just is a great keeper. He does his job. And then after those three, well, Willian, Dikodovarid, Pereira. Wolves aren't playing in the void, so I will not be recommending any players from their team. Their last encounter saw Willian score 2 goals. Apart from that, their goals, or rather their games, have been very tight, with a 3-2, which was the most recent game, then 1-1, 0-0, 1-0 to Wolves, 1-0 to Wolves. So, as you can see, it's 1 goal difference. Just pick your attacking threats and go with them. Fulham are playing Wolves, then they have Tottenham, and then they have Sheffield. So you want to be keeping your Fulham players. They have Sheffield, and then Forest, and then they play Newcastle and West Ham. These are all winnable games. After the void, Wolves have Aston Villa, Burnley, West Ham, Forest, and Arsenal. Apart from Arsenal, Wolves can definitely challenge in these games. So, after the void, look into them again. Arsenal versus Brentford. Arsenal are the best team in the Premier League right now. They score at will, they carve you apart. It's just a matter of picking your winner. I think they're ranked first in goals per match by now. They have kept the most clean sheets in the competition as well. So They are great going forward and they're great at the back. Why don't we have all our assets in Arsenal? Now, Arsenal are the only team I would tell you get Arsenal players because they are scoring 3, 4, 5 goals per game. It's ridiculous. And therefore, just get your Arsenal players and then just remove them for this game week or put them on the bench because they are the team in form right now. Just pick who you're going to choose. One of them is bound to score, but don't be silly and go and choose Nketiah or something like that. Just go choose with the people who have been playing. Go Odegaard, go Saka, go Havertz. Havertz has returned double-digit returns in the last 3 games. I'll say that again. Havertz has got 10 or more points in the last 3 games he has played for Arsenal. Coincidentally, I'm not going to say urge you, but if you don't have Brentford players, this is also the time. I can't even say that with a full heart. Brentford will be playing in Game Week 29. But whether you want to bring them in to get 0 points, I don't know. I don't know about that. That's not solid advice, so I wouldn't make that advice. But just be aware that they will be playing in Game Week 29. Arsenal should hammer them. I would say if you're looking into Luca Toni, I mean by that, by now you know I mean Ivan Toney. That's probably it. Although having said that, Mope is the most likely guy to score in that team. Or Ronslev. Arsenal, after Brentford, have Champions League and then the Void. Then they play City. Whew. So that'll be a tough one. And then after that, they have Luton, Brighton, Villa, Wolves. So their games are not easy, but they've been in great form. I'm honestly of the belief that they can beat anybody. And this game against City in the next 2 weeks will be very important for them. Brentford have Arsenal, then they have Burnley. So you will definitely want to bring in Tony for that. And then they have Manu, Brighton, Villa, Sheffield. So their games are not bad. They're just not in great form. But their fixtures are not discouraging. Well, the Arsenal one is. But after Arsenal, Aston Villa versus Spurs. Villa last beat Spurs when they met 2-1. Of course, you can imagine Watkins scored. And then in the game before that, Villa beat them again 2-1. And the game before that, Villa beat them again 2-0. But before that, they were beaten 4-0 and 2-1. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that Aston Villa have the better recent record against Spurs. Now, these two teams haven't kept a clean sheet in a while. Aston Villa haven't kept one in 5 games. Spurs haven't kept one in 7 games. So what that suggests is that there are going to be goals in this game. Now, Spurs will be playing in the Void. So you should be looking into getting players from their team. Villa also will be playing in the Void. So these are 2 good teams to get into, even though this isn't a particularly sexy fixture. Without a doubt, Watkins is the way. If you're getting a Villa player, get Watkins. Don't think twice. He should be the first player that you get. Second player that you should get is Leon Bailey. Third player you should get is Douglas Luiz. Do not go beyond those 3. If you do, you're wasting your time. For Spurs, now that Richarlison is injured, you know Son will be put to play as a striker. And to his left will be Timo Werner. Timo Werner has such potential to be a great differential. He creates chances. He creates so much trouble. He just has no end product. He is going to be the likely man to cause the most trouble in this game for Spurs. Him and probably Kulevski. In the last matchup, it was Lo Celso who scored for them. But we'll see. But of course, you know, it's Son, Timo Werner, Kulevski, in that order. Shit, what am I saying? James Maddison has had 3 assists in the last 5 games. He's been quiet since coming back from injury, but he's been performing. It's just not as loud as he was at the beginning. So he is a sneaky differential as well. Aston Villa, after this, will be having... Now, there's a bit of a caveat. Aston Villa, before they play Tottenham, are going to be playing in the Europa Cup, Europa Conference League. They play against Ajax. So you have to keep your eyes on that fixture because that outcome will determine who plays in the next game in case they have injuries. So if you're looking towards Villa players, just make your decision on Friday. After they play that game against Ajax, they will have Spurs, like I said. Then they'll have West Ham, Wolves, City, Brentford, Arsenal. So their fixtures will increase with difficulty, especially as Europe begins to come again. So be careful with your Villa players. Really monitor them because rotations are going to be coming now. Spurs, on the other hand, have no such obligations. After Villa, they have Fulham, Luton, West Ham, Forest, Newcastle. Those are all winnable games. So this would be the right time to be getting into Spurs for the long haul. And if you're going to do that, get Romero because he seems to be able to get goals. Romero and the others that I mentioned earlier. West Ham versus Burnley. West Ham haven't lost to Burnley in their last 5 meetings, although that shouldn't be something surprising because Burnley are not good. They are only better than Sheffield. Burnley, on the other hand, haven't scored in their last 3 games and haven't kept a clean sheet in their last 10 games. West Ham will be playing in the void. Ever since Paqueta came back, West Ham have just been better. They have improved. They ran out 3-1 winners over Everton in the last game. It was a bit tight and they scored really towards the death. I believe this game shouldn't be as difficult. And having a combination of Prowse, Kudus, Bowen should be enough. I know in the last game, it was Zuma, Souček and Alvarez who scored. But I don't know, those are not players you would depend on to score. These other 3, they will be involved for sure. Areola seems to be the guy who does what he needs to do. And so if you're an Areola lover, carry on. He has been delivering in patches. And when he hits, he hits. So just hope he continues hitting. I mean, every person who had high points this week had him as their keeper. West Ham are going to be playing in the, Europa League. Not Conference League like Aston Villa, but the Europa League. And therefore, even if you're going to bring in players from them, just also hold on until you find out who's available because they are playing in Gameweek 29 as well, so you will need their players. Just wait to find out who is uninjured. After Burnley, they play Villa in the void, and then Newcastle, Spurs, Wolves, Fulham. Given that they seem to be clicking again, they will be competitive and they could win 3 out of 5 of those games. So getting back into West Ham wouldn't be such a bad idea. Of course, Burnley have no obligations in Europe. They are also playing in the void, but I wouldn't advise you to bring them into the void. They will be playing Brentford in the void. So they have West Ham, Brentford, Chelsea, Wolves and Everton. They should lose all those games. They should just regroup next season in the championship and decide whether Kompany is a man for them or what they need to do because they do not have enough. Now, the marquee game of this game week will be Manchester City versus Liverpool. Now, Liverpool have been getting away with very impressive results with their children. Now, I don't know whether this is a bit of a step too far, but Man City should be favourites in this game. Having said that, you just can't know. Liverpool have been inspired of late, ever since Klopp announced, and maybe that's what's still carrying them now because there's no other explanation for this type of performances that they've been having. On paper, City are the better team. They should win. A combination of Foden, Haaland should be enough to destroy this team. Having said that, that doesn't mean that's how it will go. None of these teams are playing in Gameweek 29, so I would not advise you to bring any players in here. It is only in 1 out of the last 10 matches that both teams have failed to score. And so it is very likely that both teams will score. Having said that, it's the kids, man. It really depends on how much faith you have in them. I believe Man City will be favourites, But you just really can't write off these children, even though I feel like they have been lucky. Having said that, Manchester City are playing in the Champions League. So they're playing tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on when you listen to this. And do not change your team until after Europe. Just basically don't make any changes to your team until after Europe. So they play Copenhagen, then they play Liverpool, then after that they have the Void, and they will play Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, Luton. Now, these are not easy games for Man City, but Man City, and the difficulty scale doesn't really apply to them. They're the ones who decide it. You know what I mean? So, I can see them winning all 5 of their next games. Yeah, that's it. Liverpool are taking their children to Europe, and they're playing in the Europa League. Now, given their injury record right now, you just never know whether they can field a great team against Sparta Prague, whether they'll prioritize Europe or the league. And I would therefore recommend, like I've been recommending, wait to see if more players get injured in Europe before deciding whether to bring them in. Although, having said that, they're not playing Gameweek 29, so don't even consider that. But also you might need to remove your players. Europe may help you determine which players to remove from your team because they may be injured. Just like, for example, if you have Trippier, remove him from your team. He's injured. So, after the City game, Liverpool will have the Void. Then they'll have Man U, Brighton, Sheffield, Man U. So, their games will be tricky. Their games are not easy. And given the squad that they have, it might be just a little bit more difficult. And they will be hoping that players come back sooner rather than later. Chelsea will be playing Newcastle. Last time out, Chelsea drew 2-2 with Brentford. It was a game in which they didn't have a favourable result against them in head-to-head, so I guess a draw wasn't too bad. Newcastle, on the other hand, were impressive and they came out 3-0 winners. But they lost Trippier, so I don't know how that will affect them. Although, having said that, Livramento came on and scored. So maybe the future is already there. Chelsea haven't kept a clean sheet in 8 games. And Cole Palmer has been creating their chances. He's created 9 of their Premier League chances. So he's their best player and should be their best option. You should not choose another player before you choose him. Having said that, do not choose a Chelsea player because they are not playing Game 29. So don't get into this fixture. Ever since Newcastle got the money, they have been the better team in recent records. They beat Chelsea 4-1, drew 1-1, drew 1-1, won 1-0. So they have been the better team. Chelsea are just as inconsistent as they have been all season. They're just a proper mid-table club facing Newcastle, which is also another proper mid-table club. So it will be number 10 versus number 11. Gordon, Isak are Newcastle's best chances for points in this game. Shar and Dan Burn have been delivering of late, so if you believe in their potential, then that's fine. I wouldn't bet against them. Chelsea have been scoring of late, so it is unlikely that Newcastle will keep a clean sheet, given that they are shaky themselves. It will be a good game. After the Void, Newcastle have West Ham, Everton, Fulham, Spurs, Man U. So, not easy games, but they can deliver. Not in all of them, of course. But I wouldn't be looking to get into Newcastle players. Just keep Gordon, and then that's it. For Chelsea, after the Void, they have Burnley, Man U, Sheffield, Everton, Brighton. The thing about Chelsea is that I look at these games, I see Burnley and Sheffield in there, but I'm not even confident that they could win more than 2 goals in each of those games. Chelsea are really disappointing this season. I don't even think they will be able to keep a clean sheet against both Sheffield and Burnley. And then the last fixture of the week will be Bournemouth versus Luton, which will be on a Wednesday. Now, we've already spoken about these two teams. They have favourable fixtures over the weekend, And even playing each other would be favorable because both teams can't keep a clean sheet and, well, at least not against each other. This is one of the games, I don't know if you remember when Luton at the beginning had fixtures abandoned. And this is just one of them. This is actually the game where Lockyer got injured. This is that game. So Lanky's going to score again and give me the points that were deducted. And therefore, he will be my captain this game week. You heard it here first. Now, having said that, it brings us into, I guess, our final discussion. Captain choices. How do you choose a captain this week? I think you have three options. One, let me get the easiest one out of the way. If you're a Haaland maximalist, you're going to be with Haaland. They're playing an undermanned Liverpool and you believe Haaland will score. Haaland will probably score. Facts. That's it. If you're a Haaland maximalist, you're probably going to choose Haaland no matter what's happening. Second, Arsenal have been demolishing everybody 4, 5, 6 of late. If you pick the right Arsenal player, you are more likely to get double returns than if you're to pick anybody else. Third, which is the way I'm going, is there's a double game week. Solanke will have 2 chances to score, or rather he'll have 180 minutes to score 2 goals at least. I'm not wild enough to think I'm going to triple captain him, but he will be my captain. He's playing twice. He's playing Sheffield. He has to score against Sheffield. He just has to. And then Luton is an open game in which there will be goals. Now, on the other side of that, a real differential captain will be Morris from Luton. If you bring him onto your team, he's playing twice. He's worth gambling 2 games on. And he's also playing Gameweek 29. So if you're looking to plan into those 2 game weeks, Luton players are a way to go. And those are the only captain choices I see. Well, this has been fun. I hope you've listened to me well, and I hope you understand that there's a void coming. I feel like I've made that clear. So, have a great week, guys. Remember, there's Europe happening midweek, so delay your team making, but really have an eye on Gameweek 29. Outside that, have a great week, guys. Bye-bye.